Chapter 12 Alice's Evidence. Look here! Alice shouted, forgetting how big she had grown. She quickly stood up and knocked over the jury box with her skirt, causing all the jury to fall on the crowd below. It reminded her of when she accidentally knocked over a globe of goldfish. "Sorry," she said in a worried voice and quickly started picking up what she dropped. She couldn't stop thinking about the goldfish and felt they needed to be put back in their box right away or they would die. The king said the trial can't start until all jury members are in their seats. He spoke in a serious tone. All of them, he stressed, looking at Alice. Alice looked at the jury box and saw that she made a mistake. She put the lizard in upside down and it was waving its tail sadly because it couldn't move. She quickly fixed it, but thought to herself that it didn't matter because it would be just as useful for the trial either way. The jury took a little time to recover from being surprised. They then worked very hard to write about the accident. The lizard was too upset to do anything, just sitting and looking up. The king asked Alice, "Do you know anything about this business?" "Nothing," said Alice. "Nothing whatever," persisted the king. "Nothing whatever," said Alice. The king told the jury, "That's very important." The jury started to write it down, but the White Rabbit stopped them. "Your Majesty means it's unimportant," he said politely, but he made faces while talking. The king quickly said, "It's not important," and whispered to himself, "Important or not important?" like he was trying to decide which one sounds better. Some jury members wrote important and others wrote unimportant. Alice saw this because she was close enough to read their notes. But she thought to herself, it doesn't matter at all. The king is writing in his notebook and says, "Quiet." He reads from it, Rule 42, people over a mile tall must leave the court. Everybody looked at Alice. "I'm not a mile high," said Alice. "You are," said the king. "Nearly 2 miles high," added the queen. "I won't go anyway," Alice said. "And that rule is not real. You just made it up." The king said that it's the oldest rule. "Then it ought to be number 1, said Alice. The king went pale and quickly closed his notebook. He spoke to the jury in a soft, shaking voice and asked them to make their decision. White Rabbit says to the ruler, "Please wait, more proof is on the way. I just found this paper." "What's in it?" said the queen. The White Rabbit said, "I haven't opened it. It looks like a letter written by a prisoner to someone." The king said, "It could be that. It's not common for it to be written to no one." "Who is it directed to?" said one of the jurymen. White Rabbit said, "Not directed at all. No writing on outside." He opened the paper and added, "Not a letter, it's verse." "Did the prisoner write it?" asks another jury member. "No, they're not," said the White Rabbit. "It's strange." The jury looked confused. King said he copied someone else's writing. The jury was happy again. "Your Majesty, the knave didn't write it," said the knave. "They can't prove it because there's no signature at the end." King said, "If you didn't sign it, that makes the problem worse. You must have been up to something bad, or else you would have signed your name like an honest person." People clapped when the king said something smart for the first time that day. The queen said, "That shows he's guilty, so take him away." "That doesn't show anything," Alice said. "You don't know what they're about." "Read them," said the king. The White Rabbit put on his glasses. He asked the king, Where should I start? Start from the start, the king said seriously, and continue until you reach the end, then stop. The court was very quiet while the White Rabbit read these words. They told me you had been to her, and mentioned me to him. She gave me a good character, but said I could not swim. He sent them word I had not gone. We know it to be true. If she should push the matter on, what would become of you? I gave her 1, they gave him 2. You gave us 3 or more. They all returned from him to you, though they were mine before. If I or she should chance to be involved in this affair, he trusts to you to set them free, exactly as we were. My notion was that you had been, before she had this fit, an obstacle that came between him and ourselves and it. Don't let him know she liked them best, for this must ever be a secret, kept from all the rest, between yourself and me. The king said, important evidence. Jury, listen now. He rubbed his hands. Alice said, I'll give 6pence to whoever can explain it. I don't think it makes any sense. The jury wrote on their slates, she doesn't think it has any meaning, but none of them tried to explain the paper. The king said, if it has no meaning, it's good because we don't have to find any. But I'm not sure, I think I see some meaning in it. He looked at the words on his leg and asked the knave, can you swim? The knave shook his head with sadness and said, do I look like it? But he didn't because he was made of cardboard. The king said, okay, so far, and he kept talking to himself about the poem. He said, the jury says they know it's true. If the queen keeps pushing, what will happen to you? I gave her 1, they gave him 2. I think that's what happened with the tarts. Alice said, they all came back from him to you. Look, there they are, said the king happily, pointing to the tarts. It's clear. And did you ever have fits before? He asked the queen. The queen yelled, never, and threw an inkstand at the lizard. Bill, who was writing on his slate, stopped and tried to start again using the ink dripping down his face. The king said, words don't fit you, while looking around the court with a smile. Everyone was quiet. The king was upset and said, it's a joke. Everyone laughed. The king repeated, let the jury make a decision, 20 times that day. The queen said, no, no. Put the sentence first, then the verdict. Nonsense. Alice yelled. Having the sentence first is silly. Keep quiet. The queen said, getting angry. I won't, said Alice. The queen yelled to cut off the head, but no one reacted. Who takes care of you? Alice asked. She was now full size. You're just a deck of cards? The entire group of animals flew up and then rapidly came down to attack her. She screamed a bit, feeling both scared and mad, and tried to fight them off. But she ended up lying on the ground with her head in her sister's lap. Her sister was gently brushing away leaves that had fallen from the trees onto her face. Wake up, Alice, her sister said. You slept for a long time. Alice said, I had a strange dream. She told her sister about it as best she could. When she finished, her sister kissed her and said, it was a strange dream, but now go have your tea. It's getting late. Alice got up and ran off, thinking about how wonderful the dream was. Her sister stayed still, leaning her head on her hand while watching the sun set. She thought about Alice and all of her amazing experiences. Soon she started to dream, and this was her dream. She first dreamed about Alice. Alice was sitting on her knee and looking up at her. She could hear Alice's voice and see her hair falling into her eyes. As she listened, the place around her became alive with strange creatures from Alice's dream. As she walked, the grass rustled at her feet while the white rabbit rushed by. The mouse was scared and splashed through a nearby pool. She heard the March Hare and friends clinking teacups during their never-ending meal. The Queen's voice could be heard ordering guests to be executed. The pig baby was sneezing on the Duchess's lap and plates were breaking. The griffin was shrieking, the lizard was squeaking with a slate pencil, and guinea pigs were choking, all mixed with the distant cry of the sad mock turtle. She sat with her eyes closed, pretending she was in Wonderland. She knew that if she opened her eyes, everything would change back to reality. The grass would only make rustling sounds in the wind, and the pool would ripple because of the waving reeds. The clattering teacups would turn into tinkling sheep bells, and the Queen's loud voice would turn into the voice of a shepherd boy. All the strange noises, like the sneeze of a baby or the shriek of a griffin, would turn into the sounds of a busy farm. The distant lowing of cattle would replace the heavy sobs of the mock turtle. At last, she imagined her little sister growing up and becoming a woman. She would keep her kind and loving heart from her childhood. She would tell exciting stories to other young children, maybe even the tale of Wonderland from long ago. She would understand and share their simple sorrows and enjoy their happy moments, remembering her own childhood and happy summer days.